SaaS Therapy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SaaS Therapy. My name is Todd Kirk. I'm your host, and I'm joined by the magnanimous, the illustrious, the superior Casey Trujillo. Hey, Casey.
Oh, Todd, stop it. Tell me more.
Oh, I will. You know why I will? Because this is the show where we help you save your most important business relationships. And today we have the pleasure of talking to each other about a really important topic, and that's data. Casey, I love data. I'm a little bit of a data nerd. I love to dig in and look at information. And, the thing that I'm excited to talk about today is your perspective as someone who is constantly engaging with customers, engaging with clients, and helping them to really figure out, how they're doing. And I want to get your perspective today as a person who's more focused on the business development and the relationship side of the world to know how you think about data and how customers should think about data. So I want to start there and just get your take. Why? Right. What's from your perspective? Why does data matter?
All data is good, and I know that sounds crazy, but whether it's data that's negative or data that's positive, it's data that we can action off of. So, Todd, I'm going to give you a story. It's about the gram. For those people that are old like me.
Instagram? The
Instagram.
Okay? Oh, I feel young because I knew what you meant by that.
We're going to start here. And the theme that I want to get across to everybody is that bad data could actually be great data. Okay, that's the premise I want to talk about for this episode. So Kevin Systrom, a lot of people don't know that the app that he created was called Bourbon. And he was kind of a gamer. And so he created this app called Bourbon. And what he wanted to do, which sounds silly, and you're like, oh my gosh, how did this guy ever create Instagram? Was that he created this app where they would go take over a bar or over a restaurant, kind of like a video game, but it's in an app. And so you would show up at a bar, you would do a shout out to all your buddies and say, hey, here I am. And then all your friends would congregate and you'd all come together. Okay. That was Bourbon. He got like 80 users in there and he started pitching this to VCs, and VCs are like, you need to be more focused. So he had three choices. He could use this app to coordinate visits. He could use it for uploading videos or checking in at restaurants or bars or things like that. Those were the three use cases. Okay, first part, he took the feedback, negative data from a VC that said, hey, I'm willing to invest, but I'm not willing to invest in what you currently have. What are the best use cases you have? And he was able to look at it and say, here are my top three. So the VC then said, okay, choose one. Okay, so this is where it's awesome. This is the story a lot of people don't know. So he chooses, obviously, uploading photos. And so he's programming away, he's working on this, and he tells his girlfriend at the time, hey, check out my app. Look, you can upload your photos. You should start to upload your photos because, again, you start an app, the first people you go to are your friends, right? So she looks at it and goes, I'd actually never upload my photos there. And he's like, why wouldn't you upload your photos? And she goes, because they don't look as good as your friend Greg's. And he goes, well, of course, because Greg puts filters on all of his photos. And she goes, yeah, exactly. And then it hit him. Oh my gosh, I should put filters. One of the reasons why people put on Instagram is to have the ability to edit your photos right then and there and be able to have them look very artistic, right? So again, negative feedback. He didn't take it as negative feedback. He took it as feedback. And so I thought it would be helpful, Todd, for us to start there, that this company that's now valued at $47 billion started with an app that really wasn't going to do anything. And he consistently received feedback, though it was negative feedback. But he said it's actually great feedback because it's actually going to get me to where I want to be. Todd, did that make sense?
Yeah. It reminds me of a book that I read a year or two ago called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, right?
Yes.
And one of the things he talks about is how no is more powerful than yes. And the fact that one of the things that we tend to do is we want to get the yes because it makes us feel good, but yeses are really easy to counterfeit and they're a lot harder to action on. But when you get the no, then you're having a real conversation. You can figure out how to go to the next spot. So that's where my mind went. I love that, Casey. I think that's such a really good place to start this conversation, because I think the part where I think a lot of, especially people in the sales world, they always want to look good in front of their customer, and looking good in their mind means I always have to
Yeah,
win, right?
right.
Oh, I have to, bat 1,000 every single play. And unfortunately, that's an unrealistic standard, and B, it's not always helpful. You can become way better when you get that negative feedback. So, what would your counsel be, just to someone who is having to take that hard look in the mirror and try to figure out, like, either like how do you get that feedback, or how do you try to look for the opportunity in the negative versus just always hoping for kind of the self-aggrandizing good
Perfect.
stuff.
I first talk about, and then we're going to talk about how do you deliver it. Is that okay if we go through these kind of
Mm,
group it into these three segments?
yeah, I like it.
Okay, so I know you're a data guy, so I had to come prepared for data because you're going to be like challenging me all over the place, and you're going to be like, "What data says that?" Right? Okay, so
That
number
should that be
one,
my goal, Casey? My goal today should be to make you feel like to just
to be
attack
rattled.
you and make you
Yes.
get rattled. Okay, yeah.
All right. So the whys. Okay. So Forbes did a study, and they said leaders who gave honest feedback were rated as 5 times more effective than ones who didn't. Okay. Leaders who gave the honest feedback that had employees also it also said that the employee was more engaged, 3 times more engaged when they actually received negative feedback. They actually engage the employee. Now, I'm not saying it's feedback of like, Todd, man, you're the worst worker ever, right? Like, not that type of feedback, but honest feedback that said, Todd, hey, I noticed that in your PowerPoint, when you approached it this way, that you weren't in presentation mode. People were distracted in how you're presenting that. Like, real honest feedback that's going to help you get to your goal, right? So that's what I mean by that honest feedback. So leaders were rated 5 times more effective. Employees said they were 3 times more engaged with those type of managers, right? Okay, the last one comes from a Harvard Business Review. So we did Forbes. Harvard Business Review said 50% of people preferred corrective feedback to pure praise and recognition. When further asked what was most helpful in their careers, 72% of employees said they thought their performance would improve if managers would just provide corrective feedback. So everybody is actually wanting this. Everybody is actually valuing it. So when I wanted you to think about the why, is that's what your customer is really looking for. They're looking for honest feedback. Todd,
Okay,
I see that you want to do a follow-up question off of this.
I do.
So
Is
give
that
it to me.
okay?
Yes.
Okay, because this is I think a really this is a I think every single person who has ever had a conversation with their boss has felt like and hungered for something that
Yeah.
they can apply to be better, right? But it's very
Right.
human to want to improve and to want to grow. The challenge is I put myself in the seat of a manager, and that sometimes either it's hard to give feedback and feel like you're afraid that you're going to damage someone's like self-esteem, that you're going to make them feel worse about themselves. Sounds like to me from the data you're sharing that that's probably the least worry that you have. I think the second side is harder though, which is sometimes it's difficult to know what feedback to give
Mm-hmm.
because you're in this scenario of like giving someone bad news or giving them bad data. You're maybe not even sure how to rectify that or chart the path forward. So I guess that maybe, and maybe that's where you're going with this, Casey. But I guess what would you say to the person who says, okay, like you have me at the idea of like I want to hear more bad feedback. Surprisingly, we all want to hear that. I think that's very true. But if you're in the position where you have to give the bad feedback, what do you do to make that actually valuable?
Okay. So remember, we have why, when, how. So I'm going to jump to the how here in a little bit. I'm going to go through what you're talking about. But I
Yeah.
think the first thing when you come in with your why is your intention should be to help deliver success to your customer. If that's your intention. My intention isn't to upsell you. My intention isn't to get you to renew. My intention is to help you realize the value of why you bought my software. If that's where I stay pure in that, then not always, but for the most part, people are going to receive that and you're going to give it in a way that's going to be appreciated. It's when we have a hidden agenda, When our desire is,
Mm.
oh, how is this going to, I don't want to share this data because that might hurt my renewal, or this might blow up my upsell opportunity. That's when people can feel that. They can feel the insincerity. So I'm going to get more to the how here at the end, but right now in the why, you got to know that one, your customer is actually looking for this. They value and deepen their relationship when you give it. And number two, it's because you're actually focusing on what they want to accomplish. You are there to help them hit their goals. If we can keep that why in mind, then we're starting at a good foundation.
Mm. So, if the idea is that the reason we want to give them honest feedback, and I guess you could do this, and if from talking from a SaaS perspective, that we want customers to give us honest feedback, and we may
Yes.
need to give them honest feedback. They probably want to hear that from us too, right? That's the whole point of this: is we want to get people talking in a more open and transparent way to get to the true outcomes that everybody wants. I guess the real thing is, you mentioned not having a hidden agenda. I think that that's such a really poignant idea here. If you want to have true, honest, and real relationships with people, you have to be vulnerable. And that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with.
We all struggle with it. And I'm not saying there's a perfect person in doing this, right? This is something that it's a skill you develop. And that's why I'm so excited when we were discussing and brainstorming on topics and episodes. It was, I think, a lot of people in CS, your title says customer success. Like, you own it. You feel like you are the person responsible for it. So I can see why it's hard for you to deliver this. What I'm saying is, if you want to drive to that trusted advisor, that little phrase we all hear, you have to be able to do things like this. So
Mm.
this is going to get us to, when do I deliver it? Okay.
Can I, by the way,
Yeah. You want to ask a follow-up
can I make
question?
maybe just just an epiphany based off of what you said
Please.
there? This may not be an epiphany, so if everybody thinks this is a stupid comment, feel free to make fun of me. But I think the thing that sticks out to me is that so often we look at presenting data as the destination. Meaning, when you have a
Mm,
conversation, you are talking with your customer as if you are you've arrived, and this is the like you get to the destination. You're like, well, the destination. I thought we were going to like a 5-star restaurant, and instead
yes.
it's like a burnt out trailer with roaches in the kitchen. And I think the part that people have a hard time with is realizing that that's not how this works. You shouldn't be looking at data as a destination, but rather a touch point in your journey of where you're going to go. And when you realize that maybe your data isn't good, that's just an indicator that you haven't gotten there. But that's motivating because now it points me in the direction I should
Oh,
go.
okay. Two things, Todd, you just gave me, because now we're just kind of like going off of like ideas that we're both having during this. So two things I want to say is number one, a big reason why we don't want to share something is because of shame, right? We feel shame. And now this is something that goes back to the creation of this world. For any of those that like to read the Bible, and again, I'm not saying you have to believe the Bible. I'm just saying, if you went back and read the Bible, the first story is about two people that weren't supposed to partake of a tree and fruit of a tree, and they do, and then they go and hide because they're shameful about it. And then when God's asking them about it, hey, why'd you do it? They blame each other, right? So this
Mm-hmm.
is not new in feeling that shame of being and saying, I don't know if I want to present this. The second principle I think it's important for you to understand is something that I've talked about forever, which is fact versus story. Who says that the data you're going to present to your customer is negative? You are. Did your customer say that to you? No, they didn't. You're making up a story and telling yourself that this is bad data, when you know what? The customer might think it's great data. I've been on so many calls where a CS person was so nervous to share information. They shared the data. They took my advice and said, hey, as you look at this data, what stands out to you? They didn't go first. They asked the customer to go first. And the customer goes, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, my boss needs to see this. I can't believe that we've done blah, 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 blah. And the CS person was worried about how many people logged in. But they saw value in 50 people logging in and having this business realization. They were sold on that. Then the next question is like, how do we get more people to do this? They saw the value. So fact versus story is, a fact is, hey, Todd, we're having a podcast right now. That is a fact. Whether this is an effective podcast or not, that's a story. You might be saying, gosh, Casey, this is genius. Or you might be saying, oh, this is a horrible podcast. We got to do this again, right? That's your story you're saying. But the fact is we're holding a podcast. So too many people in CS with their customers tell a story about whether it's awesome or it's negative before they've even figured it out from their customer. So those are two principles you just made me think about as we were going through that.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. So you start with that why, get the right mindset, and stop getting in your own way by telling yourself a story. So
Yes.
great advice. Okay. So number 2, I think you said was when, right?
When do we deliver this?
When do we deliver the news?
Okay, Todd. So I'm going to start with a story. It is a week before graduation of one of my daughters. And she says, oh, I got to make up a class.
That
Okay.
seems like a perfect time to do it, right? When you have a week to do it all.
So Todd, what do I think about my child that is a week before graduation and they have a full class they have to make up? What am I thinking on the other side? Now, this is where you're going to tell a story, and then I'll tell the fact of what I was actually thinking. But what would be the story that you're conjuring in your mind here?
I think you'd probably be... I imagine, I'm going to try to channel my inner Casey. You'd probably be exasperated, and you would probably say something like, why did you wait until now?
How many times haven't we always said that, right? So when we're thinking about with our business relationships with our customers, why would we save bad news when we know for a fact that this is a bad news, that something's not going right? Like, again, I'm not telling myself a story on this one. It's just, this is bad news. The sooner you can deliver the bad news, the better. Okay. Kim Scott, she's the author of Radical Candor. She said one of her mentors at Google, he drew a graph, right? And of course, it always has 2 axes, right? So the one was the bad news, the one going vertical was your relationship. The one going horizontal was time. And he shows that there's a little bit of a gap at the beginning, but the longer that you wait to tell the bad news, then it just goes up. And he talks about that of saying, hey, when there's something that hasn't gone right, the quicker that you can talk about it, the sooner you can address it, the sooner that you can fix it and keep from all these other things going wrong. The longer you hold on to it is, again, you hiding something from your customer. Whether you are or you're not, your customer will feel that that's what you're doing. The transparency's lost. You've lost a lot of information. I remember you had Tim Hill on at Gong, and he talked about building trust, and he talked about it in coins or some type of monetary values.
Yeah,
like we're always
fill up the bank account. Yeah,
filling up the bank account. And one of the things he said was that deposit happens with positive or negative feedback, but that you're consistently giving feedback. It doesn't always have to be positive, but you have to give people information on where they're standing according to your perspective, and then let them be able to comment on that. So Kim Scott was the same. It's like, you have to deliver this as soon as possible, which is going to lead into, okay, now how do I actually do it? How do I deliver it? So, okay, you've told me the why. I get that people want to hear it.
Can I ask you a follow-up question before we move on from when? Because I think this is one of the things that I think is, I don't know. For me, when I think about data, right? I'm a person who has access to a lot of data, and I can look at it in lots of different ways. And when I see something or I find something, I want to convey it as quickly as I can. But what's interesting to me is that I would guess that most of the time, the relationship looks something like this. The CSM shares good data, the customer shares back bad data. And the customer waits to share the bad data, and the CSM ignores the bad data if they see it. So it oftentimes there's this disconnect in the way that information is flowing between the customer and the CSM. And I guess from a win perspective, the thing that I think is interesting is, like, as an example, pretty early, you can find out if a customer is going to get off track because they're not following the playbook, right?
Yes.
Let's say they got to get implemented and they have to follow these specific steps and do those things. If they don't do those in a certain time period, do we just encourage them and say, you're doing great, it's okay, customer, we'll talk a month from now whenever this is a priority, I'll just check in with you periodically? Or do we give them some tough love and be like, hey, this is value that you're leaving on the table, and your inability to focus on getting these things done is causing you to fail? Meaning, I guess my point is, when we talk about the when, is there also a dynamic here of when should you as a CSM give negative feedback to your customer?
Right.
Not just hope for that they're going to give you negative, right? We want to hear the feedback, but it goes back to my point at the beginning. I think we're oftentimes afraid to give feedback. And I think that is even true in the customer relationship.
Amen to that. And we're both not saying that every conversation you're raising a major flag, right? So let's go to your example. We're onboarding first 30 days and you're noticing that they're maybe not taking their onboarding training. Okay. So they're coming to the meetings ill prepared. You seem like you're repeating the same
Yeah, you do the
conversations.
same one over and over again. You're not
Yeah.
making any progress.
Yeah. And we're 30 days and we should be farther along. So one of the things I would do, and again, in how is you have to understand two aspects. Number one, or I should say when and how. Let's go that. So when, as I'm going to deliver some information. Now I'm not going to have to raise a red flag on this. And I'm going to decide, is this better done via email communication as a recap? Or is this something that I need to get on the phone? Is this something that I need to CC with the executive sponsor? So you got to make those decisions. I couldn't give you a playbook on that. But what you have to look at is saying, okay, what's the severity of what's taking place and who needs to know? Because right now it could be, hey, in our first 30 days, I feel that we're doing this really, really well. One of the things that could slow us down is in our meetings when we're getting together for 45 minutes to have a strategy session. I need you to finish these paths so we can have a more strategic conversations. That will help us hit your goal that you told me about in being launched in the first 60 days. You bold it, you highlight it a little bit. It's more of a recommendation, maybe hey, this is something that's coming, you just do it in an email. Okay. But let's say it's now persisted in 60 days. Now I'm actually on the phone with the person that I'm working with and I'm saying, hey, one of the things that your executive sponsor is holding me to is getting this launched in 60 days. We're 45 days in. We haven't taken the education that we need, so we're at the point where we need to be at. How are we going to address this? Now I'm having a verbal conversation and we're going through this, right? I've escalated this a little bit higher, right?
Mm.
That's the point, is when you're thinking about when is, well, I'm not raising a flag every time, and what's the medium in which I'm going to do it. And depending upon where you're getting at with those goals is kind of giving me an indication of how I'm going to start to treat this.
Yeah. So in other words, bad data is an opportunity for a course correction. And the
Yes.
longer you go and the wider you get away from the mark of where you're trying to get, the harder you have to push to get it back. So that's maybe a good indicator of when is important. You're going to start with smaller course corrections, but if those smaller course corrections aren't getting you there, then you have to do bigger and stronger or harder course corrections. Is that a fair way to think about that?
Fair way. And the advice I give this to when I'm consulting with CS leadership and different things like that, my advice is if the executive sponsor came on the call and said, why didn't you tell me about this? That really shouldn't happen. They should have been in the know from beginning and seen the recommendations that you've been putting forth, the concerns that you've been having. It shouldn't be a surprise to them of where we're at. And if it was a surprise, that you could be able to say, hey, this is what I've done, this is what I've done, this is what I've done, this is what you've been able to record, not to save face, but to say, hey, I've been trying to get this done. This is all the times in which I've mentioned that. So one, they shouldn't be surprised, but if they are surprised by chance, if you've gotten blocked by that person, that you would have the documentation to show how you've called that out consistently.
Okay, cool. I love it. Now, I mean, I started with understanding how the heck we do this better, Casey. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts here, because I think I even told you this the other day. I feel like if I really care about someone, it's really easy to go and give them good news. But if there's someone who has wronged me or made it difficult for me to really if they haven't tried to earn my respect, then it's easier for me to just not share news with them, not share information with them. And so I'm curious on this how, because I feel like I need it too. So I'm ready for the therapy session. Help me figure out how I can be better about sharing bad news, getting bad news, and working through the hard stuff.
Okay, so your how goes back to your why. Okay, it's going to make sense here in a second, Todd.
That's okay. I asked how after you told me why, so that's good news for me. Makes me feel like I'm not too far off.
So my why is, my intention is to help you have the business value, the success that you were looking for at the beginning. That's my why. So when we get to how, why do I take full ownership? So the first thing you need to do, in my opinion, in the how, is to identify, are you and is your intention to empower your customer to have the success that they're looking for? Because if it is, the question you would ask is, Todd, how do you suppose we fix this? Now, both of us, you mentioned it at the beginning of this conversation, Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. Man, I'm a believer in that book. And that's one of the things that he talks about is, why are you taking all the ownership? Isn't this a two-way communication? Wasn't a contract signed between two individuals or two companies? So I get that if there's a bug in the system, I have to completely own that. There's nothing you can do about that. I have to go fix the bug in my system, right? But for most issues that customer success deals with, it's a we challenge, and it might even be more of a customer challenge. So the first question you should be asking to your customer is, how do you suppose we fix that? I need you to see that you co-own this challenge with me. Now, here's where the personal development works into, Todd. As an individual that's delivering customer success, we usually fall into three roles. Number one, you're the villain. Oh, it's my customer's fault. Boss, I don't know why. They're the worst person to work with. They don't even know how to work a computer. I do this, I do this, I do this. Your customer's the villain, and you're setting yourself up for when you lose this renewal, you did everything you possibly could. Okay, that's the first role. Are you a villain when you're delivering negative feedback? It's not me, it's them. You're a villain. Number two, you're the victim. So meaning, it's just poor account. I don't know why I inherited this account. It wasn't my fault. Blah, 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 blah. Right? So is negative feedback that you're about ready to deliver, you're feeling that you're the victim. It's outside of your control. Again, you've done everything you can. The third one, which I think most customer success people fall into, is you're the hero. You do everything for your customer. Your customer does nothing. And at the end of the day, your customer takes no ownership, and they renew sometimes, they don't renew sometimes. So my how, first advice is, you're asking that customer, hey, how do you suppose we fix this? And number two, you got to identify who you are as an individual. So you can correct that. Don't villainize something. Don't be a victim to something, and don't try to hero it. Be customer success. Work with your customer to have the success. And in my opinion, they own more of the success than you do. They're the ones using the software. They're the ones trying to get their employees to use the software. They had the need that they needed to be fixed. You are a trusted advisor trying to guide them down the road and giving them data, giving them positive, honest feedback, negative feedback at times, so you can help them get to the success they want. Because when someone is empowered, that person takes control of their own destiny.
Casey, I think that's, don't be a villain, don't be a victim, and don't be a hero. So what do we call this? Be a friend, be a partner, be a, like, I mean, it goes, be customer success. Well, okay. Customer success. That sounds great. It doesn't sit on a bumper sticker very well.
That does not sit on a bumper sticker. We'll have our audience comment. What should that be called?
What? Yeah, basically, Casey said, don't be a villain, a victim, or a hero. All of those are terrible. But then my first question is, well, what? Be customer success. Well, yeah, but we just said customer success can be heroes, villains, or victims. Come on, what are we doing here? Okay, guys, everybody, if you're listening, tell us. Casey needs a good name for this. What are you supposed to be? What is the name of what Casey just described?
Yeah, I think what I would actually say, and I haven't really put something out on LinkedIn on this or something like that. I've been thinking about it forever. But to me, customer success is customer success. Like, the customer has the success. I'm not customer success. You are customer success. I am the vehicle or the agent to help you be guided on that success. So maybe it's trusted advisor, but yeah, that would be my feedback on that.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm excited to hear what people. I like the idea of the bumper sticker, and we got to figure out what that name is. We'll figure it out.
We'll come over that.
Everybody help us. All right, Casey. Let's just go back. There's a why, there's a why, a when, and a how. What's the why? How would you summarize that for us, real quick?
Intention. Be intentional of wanting to help someone get to where they want to go.
Okay. The when is really early, as soon as possible.
Early and consistent.
Yeah. And then the how is don't be a hero, villain, or victim.
Yep.
Go and just focus on being an agent for success. So
There it is. I love it, man.
Casey, we always have one question we ask all our guests. We
Yes.
just talk for half an hour. You have awesome insights that I hope everybody's having gears turning of how they can be better and how they can better support their customers. What, if you could give anybody a homework assignment, what would it be today?
Fact or story? If you could just keep that phrase in your head, and again, this is outside of work. This is just in anything in your life. Is this really a fact? Is this true? Or is this a story I'm telling myself? I think we just waste too much emotion, energy on things that aren't real, that we've told ourselves. And we've all done it where we're like, wow, that wasn't as bad as what I thought it was going to be. What you're really saying is, I played myself through that whole thing. I had the conversation. I emotionally drained myself. And wow, that didn't go anyway the way I thought it would be. Yeah, that's because you told yourself a story. So my homework assignment, fact, or is that a story? And really try to work yourself and increase your emotional intelligence around that.
Oh, so good. Casey, I love it. Thank you to all of our listeners for joining us today and for talking with us about why bad data is good, why getting negative feedback is awesome, and we should embrace it and change our mindset to be better. We want to hear your comments. We want to hear your ideas. How do we help Casey? We need a workshop that's awesome.
Yes.
It's like almost awesome, like mic drop moment. Help us, Mike. help workshop that for Casey so we can get a cool one-liner that just gives you all the feels. And
Love it.
We'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Todd.
SaaS Therapy is brought to you by Brainstorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.